on some interventions used to treat anxiety and stress in terms of, common ones that mental health professionals like to implement. We're going to talk a little bit about how to help. We have a slide dedicated for some do's and don'ts in interacting with your child and how to best support them. And then we have a slide for resources as well.
So the first step on today's journey is trying to understand anxiety a little bit better. So one of the things that we know is that anxiety can take on different characteristics. It could look different ways in different people, just depending on kind of what they're experiencing, how they're being most affected. So there can be many different symptoms. They can manifest both emotionally and in our thoughts, and they can also manifest physically. So some common signs and symptoms to look out for, especially in teens, would include excessive worry or distress, difficulty being able to control the worry or controlling the thoughts, catastrophizing, which is kind of like imagining the worst case scenario. Some people think the worst case scenario, some people visualize the worst case scenario, but sort of like following a difficult or a challenging thought all the way to the end of the line, kind of playing out what would be the worst case scenario. Restlessness, irritability, changes in sleep. Sometimes you might see changes in appetite with anxiety, but I think it's more often the sleep changes, either kind of difficulty settling down to sleep for the night or difficulty staying asleep, waking up sometimes with whether it's like intrusive thoughts or just kind of difficulty maintaining that kind of settled state. Chest pains, difficulty breathing, and then obviously for our purposes here at school, one of the big things that we look for in determining whether the anxiety is a challenge or a significant kind of it's reached a problem stage is when we start to see impairment in a couple different areas of functioning. So that for our purposes here would include school and social, but there's obviously overlap with parents and what you're seeing at home as well. If students are starting to isolate themselves, if they're starting to show anxiety about going to certain places.
So now kind of expand on really what normal versus problem anxiety is. I think that anxiety exists on a spectrum. I think that every human has experienced some anxiety or worry in their day-to-day life. Anxiety has really helped humans survive. It's a way to protect yourself. It can serve as a motivator. I'll just use an example in terms of, schooling your children. So like say they have a test coming up and, they're expressing some worry or concern over it, and that anxiety can serve as a motivator for them to, go home, study, make sure they know what's on the test. And that's a situation in the scenario when anxiety can typically serve as a motivator, and it's kind of, in a way, good anxiety. I know that kind of seems like an oxymoron, good anxiety, but it's a way to help them motivate themselves and prepare themselves for what's to come ahead. Problem anxiety is when it's considered it's abnormal. It's really impacting them on a day-to-day basis. It's oftentimes irrational. It causes them to do things maybe they don't normally do, or withdraw, like Ms. Montana said. It's impacting them and interfering with their daily life, and it's really just proving to be a struggle for them that they are overcome with this excessive worry, these excessive thoughts that they are having. So I think it's very important to make that distinction because, if it comes to you having anxiety, it doesn't necessarily mean it's problem anxiety, but it's just something really good to be aware of and to know the signs when it becomes abnormal, and kind of have that awareness as parents is very important.
Sort of to go off of what Ms. Farley said, the National Institute of Mental Health estimates that around 36% of teens struggle with anxiety. They don't break that figure out into how much is considered like normal or typical anxiety, but for the most part, I think in that case, considering students and teens who are, experiencing some negative impacts. So that's a pretty significant number. Factors that can impact anxiety and stress could be anything. It could be peer relationships, social media, school or extracurricular activities, difficult things that are being experienced at home. Potentially, it could be a divorce, a loss, student who's struggling with grief. Sometimes there's instability due to various factors at home. That also could be a contributing factor, bullying, and also past trauma. And so we know that adolescence is a time of significant change, not just physically, but also mentally and emotionally. All of those different factors come together. So there may be a number of things that are causing anxiety and stress, and increasing your awareness as parents of the environmental factors that might be contributing is often the first step in starting to understand a little bit more of what your child or your teen is experiencing, and kind of finding that initial piece of the puzzle to start with.
So now I'll talk a little bit about some common interventions mental health professionals like to use to treat and combat anxiety and stress in teens. I'm not sure if you've heard of this, but the acronyms are very popularly used. CBT and DBT. CBT stands for cognitive behavioral therapy. It's very, both of these are extensively researched and found to be really effective, especially with adolescents and teens dealing with anxiety and stress, other things like depression as well. So these two interventions are very useful when it comes to that. So CBT, I'll talk a little bit about that. CBT really attempts to identify the relationship between these thoughts and emotions and the behaviors of your child. Oftentimes, where the anxiety and the stress stems from, it begins in the thoughts. The first thought that comes to mind is I like to call them our first automatic thoughts. Oftentimes they're negative, and I like to call them garbage thoughts. So they are really, just negative thoughts that try to convince you of something that is, it tries to convince you that you're in danger, there's a threat, and you need to act on that. So CBT really attempts to identify the relationship between those, and in identifying the relationship, it also aims to alter them and replace them with more productive thoughts. So the first step is awareness, and the second step is kind of seeing what we can do to replace those negative thoughts. So that's a very commonly used intervention. CBT also includes mindfulness, things like that. I feel like I gravitate more towards using CBT in my work with clients because it's a really flexible approach, and it really helps in all different facets of life. DBT is something kind of similar, dialectical behavioral therapy. It really aims to teach that emotional regulation aspect, being able to help kids regulate their emotions, the stress tolerance. When these harmful or stressful emotions come up, DBT aims to teach them how to tolerate them, because that's a very important part in recognizing and understanding yourself and how you react to certain anxiety and stress. Like I mentioned before, mindfulness, DBT aims to talk a little bit about that, and interpersonal effectiveness. It really places importance on how to better relationships with others and helps you in that aspect. So both interventions are things that I know I gravitate towards, a lot of mental health professionals gravitate towards to help these specific, help treat anxiety and worry and stress in teens.
When Ms. Shenkarelli mentioned the cognitive triangle, here's a graphic to help illustrate that a little bit more. And you can kind of see how interconnected the three domains that are included in the triangle are. Whether we're talking about thoughts or behaviors or feelings, at any given time, whichever one of those you're focusing on, at least one other area is being impacted just by the behavior, the feeling, or the thoughts. And so it's easy to see how a challenge in one of these areas could lead to, kind of a spiraling of thoughts or a cycle of difficult thoughts. But it's also useful to remember that there is interconnectedness between these things for a purpose, as Mr. Curley also mentioned, from that self-protective aspect that we're always taking in the information. So just kind of remembering that whichever challenge area is being focused on, there's an impact.
So now we just want to touch upon briefly the biological basis for anxiety and stress. Stressful and anxiety producing situations triggers our brain's direct perception system. This is the area of the brain that, monitors threats and, it monitors if we're in danger or not. I'm sure you've heard the fight, flight, or freeze mode. Stressful and anxiety situations activate that. It really causes your, being to go into autopilot mode, and it's really difficult to control your emotions when this stress response is activated. And constant activation of the stress response really takes a toll on the body. It's not good to be in this state for, however long. And, constant activation of it, like I said, it really takes a toll. And, your child may do things that they may not normally do when they're in this mode, say things that they may not normally do. So it's very important to understand how to get yourself out of that stress response. I'm going to talk about some of these methods that help your child examine the appropriateness of that response and, the threat. So they can kind of, examine it in like, okay, am I in danger? Am I just, having these negative thoughts? It kind of helps combat that and intercepts that threat perception system. So how I like to, counter that stress response. First, I really like to talk about deep breathing techniques in practices with my clients. I know sometimes kids find these activities a little silly, which is normal, which is fine, but they really help, and they kind of, kick yourself out of that, fight, flight, or freeze mode, and allows you to kind of operate with a more rational mind. So common one I like to do is called box breathing. It's very simple. It's just breathe in 4, breathe out 4, and then over and over again. So if you want, you can say imagine a box, just imagine a box in your head and breathe in 4, breathe out 4, imagine the box expanding and closing. That really gives our brains enough time to examine the threat level and, get yourself back to that baseline. Grounding techniques, another technique that sometimes kids find a little silly, but it really works. Grounding techniques help them become more present in the moment. One I often really gravitate towards is called the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 method. This is one that takes a lot of thinking, and I think that's good because it allows your brain to kind of focus on something else. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 method is name 5 things that you see, 4 things that you hear, 3 things that you feel, 2 things that you can smell, and 1 thing that you can taste. So even like myself, I sometimes need some time to think about it, and I think that in doing this activity with your kids, it helps them just focus on something else other than the anxious thoughts or the stress that they're feeling. Another grounding technique I like to use is the categories method. This is something that your child can do sitting in class, and just if they're feeling that anxiety and that stress bubbling up. Categories is what it sounds like. You pick a color and you name all the colors you can think of while you're sitting there for however long that you need. So those techniques really just are some things that your child can do by themselves. Doesn't really require any work, but it just requires the brain to kind of think a little bit. Progressive muscle relaxation. This is a physical thing that your child can use when they are in that stress response. Progressive muscle relaxation starts at the toes. So it's like squeezing your toes really tight, letting go, and then squeezing your legs really tight, letting go, and then coming all the way up your body. So it's squeezing your arms really tight, letting go. This also just helps, have them have that physical sensation to, help them realize that, okay, I'm here in the present moment, this may not be a threat, and kind of gets them back to that baseline to where they can cope with it. They can implement their other coping skills that they have in their toolbox. Physical activity obviously is a great thing to counter stress. Mindfulness, again, visualization activities. This is something that your child can do, just sitting as well in class or something. And also, of course, social support and connection. That's very important in adolescence and can often reduce that that stress response. So now I'm going to go into the do's and don'ts portion of interacting with your teen and anxiety and stress. I think that coping with anxiety and stress is very difficult for your teens, but it also can be a little difficult for you as parents to navigate at home. And I do find that a lot in my practice with clients and in families that their kids' teen stress and response really kind of impacts them at home as well, and it can create chaos. So I know that that's something a struggle for parents sometimes, and I think it's also important to understand that conflict and that chaos is kind of a part of normal adolescent development. your child, like Ms. Montana said, it's a time of intense change, emotional, physical changes. Your child is trying to figure out where they fit in the world. Who are they? They might be trying to get a little bit more independence, and a lot of things are happening. So adding on anxiety and stress on top of that can create a lot of conflict and anxiety and stress at home as well. So I'm going to be addressing the do's first. When your kid is coping with anxiety, or you're noticing them that they are more anxious than usual, you're noticing the signs, the symptoms of anxiety and stress, I want to encourage you to ask appropriate questions. Appropriate questions look like, how are you feeling? What are you feeling? How can I help you? What can I do to best support you in this time? So appropriate questions like that. Holding space for your teen's feelings. Holding space really looks like, just making sure that they know that you guys are there for them. You have that open door policy. They can come to you with any kind of concern. And when they do that, being present in the conversation, allowing whatever emotion that needs to come up, and just really attempting to validate their feelings and say like, hey, like, I understand you're going through a really hard time. Let's talk about it some more. Practice reflective listening. We're going to go into a little bit more detail in the next couple of slides of reflective listening. Encouraging social interaction and connection. Like I said before, it's very important with an adolescent to encourage that. And also the next two is, set reasonable expectations, boundaries, and appropriate consequences. You guys are still parents, and it's very appropriate to instill boundaries with your children, appropriate consequences when it is needed. So it's still, highly encouraged to do that with your children as well. Engage in self-care. I've been finding that a lot of my clients really don't understand what self-care is. They come to me and they're like, what is that? Like, I've never heard that before, which is really surprising. So I think that it's very important for, you as parents to really, engage in self-care, do things that you like to do, show your children that that's an important part of life to avoid, burnout, avoid stress, avoid anxiety. So if you do that as parents, I think that it's really helpful for your kids to see, like, okay, like, I can do it too. Like, I need to protect myself from stress and anxiety. Engage in family therapy. Ms. Montana found a really good, article that about parent-based treatment. It showed that when parents are involved in their child's treatment, or they're getting their own treatment, own therapy themselves, it really proves the reduction of stress and anxiety in their kids too. So, engaging in the family therapy is really important. So you can kind of understand your own emotions as well as, understanding your child a little bit more and making sure that you're not you're doing things that are reinforcing your child's anxiety. Engaging in family therapy is a little tricky because I think that your kids have to be willing to take part in it. Sometimes they don't. But I think that it's still very important to mention, and parent-based treatment is really great because it shows that you're willing to help them out, you're willing to work through this with them. So I think it's just great for your children to see. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about some don'ts. The first one being respond with high emotion. What this means is that if and when your child does come to you and talk to you about some things that they've been experiencing, their struggles that they've been having, I think that a lot of parents like to respond with that high emotion and just like, what are you talking about? Like, I don't want to say overreaction, but just that high emotion. I really want to, talk about how that can impact your child who is coming to you. It can really invalidate their own feelings and make them feel like they can't come to you because you are responding with such high emotion. Then I think that it makes them feel like then they have to comfort you when they're trying to be comforted. So it's very important to remind yourself when your child does come to you and talk to you about certain things to kind of regulate your own emotions, take a step back and say, okay, like, let me push my emotions aside for just a little bit, just to hear my kid out. Another, don't jump to problem solving. I know that it's very hard to not want to jump to problem solving and want to fix your child's, whatever they're going through right away. It's really hard. I struggle with that too, wanting to jump to problem solving mode, but it's important to sometimes sit with those feelings. I know it can be uncomfortable and you want to just go in and save your children, but sometimes that can really lead to the invalidation of feelings and making your child feel like their feelings are not valid and what they're going through is not a challenge. Like I said, with another, don't discredit your team's feelings. Don't tell them they have nothing to worry about. I know it may seem on the outside that they, don't have anything to worry about. But, I think that is also very validating and it can, just really create that confusion amongst your kids. Don't ignore nonverbals. This, I think, aspect is a little bit towards the conflict part of it. If your child is, if there's conflict arising, if there is, you're talking about certain things and, just there's arguments, there's yelling, I want to encourage you to, pay attention to the nonverbal. So if your child is just, looks like they really just don't want to talk and it's just not the time, not the day, just, respect that, allow them to have, take a break, say, hey, like, I've been noticing that, you're getting a little agitated, let's take a break, let's come back to it in, 5-10 minutes and see how you feel then. So really pay attention to those nonverbals and how your child is trying to communicate with you. Last one, don't make any promises. This is important because, we don't know what's going to happen and, we really don't have a crystal ball that's going to, tell us what the future is. So if you're making promises to your child, saying like, oh, everything is going to be okay, you're going to get a 100 on that test, that really doesn't, help them because you don't know that for sure. So just really keep in mind, trying not to make promises, not jumping to problem solving mode, just trying to be there, hold that space for your child.
Excellent tips and information. To go a little bit more in detail about the reflective listening that Ms. Jennifer really talked about, it's a type of listening that involves paying a respectful attention to the content and the feeling that's expressed in another person's communication. And so I think this is where like being able to regulate ourselves when we're listening to our children is a really, really important piece, because sometimes when we are so activated, we're fearful or frustrated or concerned so much about what our child is saying, our own system kind of takes over, and it doesn't always leave room for this kind of reflective listening where we're not just listening to the words that they're saying, we're also taking in those nonverbals. We're listening for the feeling that's expressed and kind of listening for what's not said in addition to just the words that they're saying, kind of being able to read between the lines a little bit. So reflective listening can take the form of, I like to think of it often as scaffolding, especially with my own children, that if we jump to problem solving too quickly, we're actually taking away an opportunity for our children to kind of sit with the discomfort. Then number one, they're learning how to sit with discomfort. If they're able to do that successfully, they learn that they can be uncomfortable and still be okay. And then from there, if we kind of scaffold it and build it out a little bit for them, kind of put a little bit of a shape around what they're saying, sometimes we can then help guide them to their own problem solving, which really, I think long-term is one of the key management strategies for anxiety, is knowing that whatever comes up, I can manage this. I have this toolkit of experiences and skills that I can reflect back to. Maybe it's a similar situation that came up in the past. Okay, this looks a little bit like that. Maybe I can apply some of those skills to this new situation. So reflective listening is really important because it's how you're getting all of that data and information from your child, and it will help you to sort of scaffold things out for them so that hopefully, if they're willing to let you work with them for problem solving, that's excellent. And then eventually they'll be able to problem solve a little bit more on their own.
So to just expand, we have a great little formula on reflective listening, but before we get to that, I kind of want to expand on what exactly how to convey that you are reflective listening. So reflective listening, there's a lot of nonverbals that go into it. So your body language, using eye contact, and there's something called minimal encouragers that is okay. I'm just making sure that they know that you are following the conversation. There's a lot of benefits to reflective listening. It really is a step beyond active listening, and using this formula and using reflective listening allows your child to make, to feel like that you understand them. And also, it's a good thing because if you do get the feeling or the reflection of feeling wrong, it gives your child the chance to correct you and say, no, that's not really what I'm feeling. This is actually what I'm feeling. So in doing that, using this formula, it helps your kid to kind of organize their own feelings and their own emotions and helping you do the same with them. So the basic reflective listening formula is, it sounds like, I'm hearing that you're saying, if I hear you correctly, so it sounds like plus the feeling, and then, because about, when, about, because of. So a great example is, your child is coming to you, I'm having anxiety, I don't really know what's going on. Reflective listening is, it sounds like you're really having a hard time. How can I support you? So you can use this formula to kind of help you understand what exactly your child is feeling. It really creates that understanding and awareness. And I think that, if you do implement that reflective listening formula prior to, anything else, it can also help you with that aspect of, not responding with that high emotion and taking a second, because you also have to think, okay, like, how can I phrase this? How can I tell my child, like, I'm understanding what they're saying, and really helps them. So this formula, I think, is in the pamphlets. So it also, takes a lot of practice too. So practicing this with your child or, just by yourself can really help them understand that, you're trying to understand them and really help them feel supported.
One other thing I wanted to mention that I think we've spoken about previously is like the leading questions. We want to try not to ask leading questions because sometimes it's just what we do. It's kind of a habit. It's a way of speaking for so many of us, but it can kind of overlay our own perception or our own feeling on top of whatever it is that your child might be feeling. And what we really want is like the clearest, like unfiltered version possible from them. So sort of if you suspect from your reflective listening formula that your child is anxious about a test, maybe we don't jump right ahead and say, oh, are you feeling worried about the test? You can kind of like deconstruct that a little bit and take a few steps back and say, I hear you saying this class is worrying you. And instead of saying, are you worried about the test next week, let them try to get there on their own a little bit. And that, I think goes to your point about just helping them to feel like they're heard and that you're listening and doing your best to really try to be in there present with them.
Yeah, and it also helps because I feel like sometimes teens are tired of being asked questions all day. So that's kind of a way to avoid asking your child a question and just really trying to understand. So we have some resources. Reflective listening, this book, it's a little old, but I found that it's really great. It kind of goes into more detail on what reflective listening is, examples, how to really, figure out how to implement it with your kids. So I think that if you just look up the name with these authors, a PDF will come up on Google. Ms. Montana also found a really great resource for Wellness Wednesday's parent program. It's presented by William Patterson University. And I think each week they do some workshops for parents. Do you want to elaborate a little bit more on that?
Each month, they have ranged from, I think there's one tomorrow, December 14th. I think it may not be too late to sign up for it. And it's about like holding boundaries with family, which I think is a really useful one, especially now that we're in the holiday season. That's information that probably all of us can benefit from, but each month they have a different focus. I know some of the ones coming up for the winter and the springtime are like being able to prepare healthy meals for families and how we can still do that even though the demands on our time are so great. And we're kind of limited sometimes in what we're able to do. So those kinds of things, I know we've emailed them out, but we may be able to put a link on our website so that you can access the flyer quickly and see what is coming up in the future.
Yeah. And I've also listed psychologytoday.com. I'm not sure if you've heard about this site before, but it's a really great resource used to, if you're finding after this presentation that your child has the worrisome symptoms of anxiety and stress, it's a really great, if they aren't already hooked up with, therapists, it's a great resource to use to locate therapists, psychiatrists. Psychology Today also has additional information on there as well. There's a tab for family support groups, just group therapy for your child. So that's another really great resource tip to use if you are, looking. You can, filter based on insurance. I think I love Psychology. It's just a really great website to use to locate if you do one, even for yourself, maybe, therapists, psychiatrists, any additional information like that.
And just a quick reminder, we will be sharing all of this, all of the pamphlets that we have, the resources, everything will be, this presentation will be recorded and posted, and we'll also be sending everything home, either, maybe we'll mail the pamphlets. We could email maybe a PDF of the pamphlets.
Yes.
That's probably the easiest way to accomplish that.
Yeah.
But yes, everything will be shared separately.
And we're on our question and answer portion. If there's any questions, we would love to elaborate some more.
So we can meet once a month.
Yeah, I think so. Is it virtual? I think it's
I
virtual.
think it is virtual, and it is monthly. I think it's new, something that they've started this year. They began it, I think, in October, but they're continuing it through the springtime.
It's free to register, right?
Yes. So I'll keep a note to send that.
Yeah, the link I included on it, I'm sure it's probably a way to copy a link online, but this is the direct link to the page to register. So once you go on that link, it'll take you to the page and it'll show, what workshops are coming up and how to register. I know it's a lot of information.
Like emergency help. So what hospitals would you go? Like which hospitals best for that, or which, what resources? Like where would you go?
So, I think that it depends on location. I'm not really familiar with the hospitals in this area. But if it's like a imminent emergency,
Obviously, ER.
ER.
Like, would you go to in Hamilton, St. Joseph's, or would you go to Children? Like, to address stuff if there was any.
If it's a hospital, I'm sure they have the resources there. There's also a really great resource. My background is working with families and family support. So I used to work in intensive family support services. So it really was aimed for the families, helping with them cope with with their child with mental illness. So a really great resource I found from working there was it's PESS. It's the Psychiatric Emergency Global Response. So I think it's a number, and maybe you can send it out too. So it's a number that you can call if your child is having a psychiatric emergency or just any kind of emergency related to their mental health. If you're concerned about them hurting themselves, it's a mobile response team. So they'll send people out to you, and then they'll kind of take it from there. They'll assess whether they do need to go to the hospital. And I think that it's a really great resource for you as parents, so that you can have that as well as also just calling 911. Sometimes
That information before everything.
yeah. And also there is the hospital, you can call 911,
Of course.
yeah, it's just a good additional resource to have.
For the most part, wherever, in that kind of emergency situation, my background is in crisis intervention in the hospital setting. That's what I did before I was here. And pretty much wherever you go, if they don't have the staff there, if the screener is needed and they don't have a screener on staff, the hospitals will coordinate to bring a screener in from another location. Screeners aren't always needed, so it could be something that you're just able to be seen and stabilized, and they can provide referrals. But for the most part, the Chilton would be able to accommodate that, as would any other hospital with an emergency.
No.
Okay, great. Well, thank you everyone for joining us, whether you're in person, we appreciate it, whether you're virtual, we appreciate it. We will be sending out the resources to all parents. If you think of questions later, I know we covered a lot today. And sometimes we don't think of questions, at least I don't think of questions usually till a couple hours later. So please reach out to your child's counselor. If you have questions, we can get you in contact with Ms. Jefferelli. If you have questions more specific to what she was talking about, or if you have questions specifically about, Tri-County, we can put you in contact with her, or we can provide whatever resources hopefully answer your questions. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah, have a good day.
Have a good day. Thank you.
Bye.